Welcome to Rebuilding Retail. I'm excited about this panel. Let's get this started. Let's have our panelists introduce themselves.
I am Steve Bly, Creative Director and Associate Director of Healthcare at Leggett Architects in Chicagoland and 5 other locations in the upper Midwest, all the way from Iowa to Columbus, Ohio. And my specialty is healthcare, but I've really done almost every sector type you can imagine.
Kurt Bookman, I'm the Director of Corporate Commercial Architecture at Leggett Architects. I've got a significant background when it comes to retail, having done malls and retail spaces across the globe, and all sorts of repositionings as well. I was for a long time, renovated a lot of historic buildings for certain clients, so understand the challenges that it takes to reposition a property, in addition to trying to stay up and abreast of what's changing in the retail market to keep it viable, both at a macro and micro scale.
I'm Chris Wilson. I'm the National Agency Lead for Retail for JLL, to JLL in 2015, and took this role on in March.
John Morris, CBRE, been here at CBRE just over a year. Was at a different real estate company for 14 years before that. And my primary focus up to the point that I got in commercial real estate was logistics. So I came on to C&W to lead their logistics advisory business and then their logistics real estate business. Here at CB, I lead our industrial business for the Americas, and as of April, also now lead the retail business. The retail business, CB had great plans for restructure, rebuild, reopen, and then reinvest. I just think we had to sort of accelerate our movement to bring those two disciplines closer together when COVID hit. So that's the chaos I've been managing through since April. And
Angie Solanki, National Director for the U.S. at Colliers. And so I've also been in the business for a handful of time, 30 years. I've only specialized in retail, started out with working with the Irvine Company, so learned quite a bit 30 years back, and it's definitely helped look at retail from more of a holistic approach. So very excited to be here and participate with this panel. Thanks for having us.
Hi, I'm Dan Jasper. I am Vice President at Mall of America. Mall of America is at 5.6 million downtown Minneapolis and St. Paul. And in a typical year, not this year, we attract more than 40 million annual guests. So it's a huge economic engine for the state of Minnesota, a huge supplier of jobs. And actually it is a brand that's known worldwide.
Not all retail is getting crushed. Some sectors are doing well. As my good friend Ryan Severino says, this economic destruction is brought to you by the letter K. Some things are going up, some things are going.
It's that we're able to pivot quickly with shelter in place, or the ones that are definitely successful. But those brands and those retailers are also successful because they've allocated a tremendous amount of capital in creating that whole omni-channel experience. I think the stat that I saw recently was that the curbside pickup, for example, people ordering online, whether it's through mobile or other device, pickup curbside has increased by 241%. So though that to me is not a trend, I think that's going to continue.
It's not just food though. Does that include other retailers?
Yeah, that's not food whatsoever. That's actually more of your hard goods type of items. So, for example, if you look at what Best Buy has done, Best Buy's done a fantastic job. They're using their, large big box format as a mini fulfillment where, they're storing their items there, and people are, before we were able to go out and either go into the store or.
I totally agree. So just point out your comment on Best Buy, a supply chain leader, an omni-channel leader, right? And a stock that a decade ago, much different in terms of how it looks in terms of its market cap today, because they have leveraged their leadership. And as strong as their supply chain geospatial teams have been, you're right, Angie, they're figuring out how to do ship from store, where to put the inventory. I think we all probably believe that stores will have more inventory to do better omni-channel work for customers, but it's not that every store can have more inventory. That's a working capital destruction. But I think Best Buy is really figuring that out. It's really, I love that example of what's working well in retail omni-channel.
So I'll add. I have found the concept of essential needs an interesting concept. Forever, most of those needs were called daily needs, and those are the retailers that we're really seeing thriving in this market. Some of them are killing it. So, you know, think grocery and drug, but the value is so surprising. Home centers, Home Depot, Lowe's, people crafting at home, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, the TJX concepts. Once these retailers got open in most parts of the country, you know, midsummer, late summer, something like that, depending on when they could get their stores restocked and opened, have really done a good job.
Do you think, Chris, does that continue, or does that start to wane off as we get on our vaccine?
So I think that these are the retailers that really emerged following the 2008 disruption. Consumers in 2009, 10, and 11 discovered Walmart, many who'd never really been in there before. Walmart was pretty well known for, and those stores starting to bring in merchandise that were good for really every income demographic. And so it's not surprising to me that as people started to be permitted to shop again, that they found their way back to places that they were finding the merchandise that they wanted and that were affordable.
Our experience too, from a landlord retail perspective, is that those brands that were able to pivot quickly, that understood that this was not a short term, those brands that were able to make those changes. We've seen strong efforts in a bunch of athleisure, electronics, home and office wares types of categories. And those that were willing to, and landlords that are willing to offer new services. A huge building like Mall of America, you know, we have 27 entrances. How do you do curbside pickup? How do you make it convenient? We've done that, right? So we've offered several sites, and we worked very closely with our tenants to offer that service. And that
facilities, ghost kitchens, entertainment, medical, micro hospitals, runs the gamut. Let's dive in, take a closer look at which of these strategies are real and which are just great ideas on paper.
I think there's the proposition of how these malls came to be and strip centers came to be, right? So when you plan a strip center, you know, in theory, like in an urban planning sense, you're kind of planning it from like a 10 to 15 minute radius of, you know, the population you're drawing from. But whereas a mall, you know, back when they started figuring this out, it was like about a 30 to 45 minute drive is to become that anchor. So malls are positioned properly to draw from large centers of population, whereas the strip centers are really more the local, you know, feeding the local population. So we're seeing differences in how, you know, the different types of opportunities when it comes to positioning beyond the grocery stores and all that, is some of these stores, you know, either, you know, falter due to the era or falter due to, you know, obsolescence. We're finding there's opportunities to backfill in and preserve, because there's a lot of advantages to what we're seeing. A lot of opportunities obviously in fulfillment, as we're talking about with Best Buy and kind of repurposing their own stores. But, you know, these mall boxes are in my mind extremely valuable, and they can be done, you know, many different ways to kind of feed the mall. So in a planning sense, if, you know, when I'm brought in to look at, you know, kind of remaster planning a mall, I look at it from an 18-hour standpoint. What can I do, and what, you know, series of functions can I create that, you know, really support generating foot traffic over an 18-hour period of a day? And, you know, that'll then in theory help all the rest of the mall and retail center tenants, because you're just bringing people to that destination, whether it be, 2 minutes on a pickup, or, if they're getting out of their cars and spending time at the destination.
Kurt, it's interesting you say that, because we've definitely seen, if we really stop and think about what we have in the US, we are over retailed, right? We have, I think it's like 23 square feet per person, whereas in other, countries it's 5. So this, call it, taking traditional and non-traditional and mixing it up. I totally agree with you. We need to do that, because I think it's going to really show the health and vibrancy and sustainability going forward. I mean, I read somewhere where it's something like you can see a increase in foot traffic in terms of sales per square foot, going from $40 almost to $90 per square foot when you start to bring in other non-traditional uses, such as healthcare. I mean, it's just a convenience. I mean, I would love to go have a one-stop shop, and I'm not just shopping, but I'm shopping, I'm eating, I'm working out, and then I'm also seeing my going to see my, clinic, to the healthcare. So yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah, I think footprints will be consolidated for sure. I think that's a primary focus in really every mall category, but even in the Class A malls, I think we'll see that densification, Angie. I also think, as part of the experience you just described, how do you amenitize for that? So how do you amenitize in retail to meet your expectations in that multi-dimensional experience? And then how do you convenience augment the mall? So again, we're talking about pick up in store, but what that looks like feels like a half step or a marginal change maybe wouldn't be enough for that retail mall experience to thrive. I think it's got to be, there's some significant project management work to do in this country in the next 3 years to restructure retail for a pickup from store.
Part of that is the power of connection, right? I mean, the power of connection to an individual, in that sales sense. The fear was, oh, we're behind a mask and we're picking up in our cars, and how do we get that power of connection back so that people resonate to the brand again? So in a lot of ways, that's some of the master planning that needs to occur, is we need to help set up these malls as they kind of pivot from that, potentially that in-person model to support and then maybe that's a 10-minute exercise, and we've got to look at it temporally and like, okay, what if that becomes a 2-minute exercise? And how do we get that, that sort of connection and that concept of touch, and how do we achieve that in this sort of new era? And that's going to be important going forward as we look at the architecture to support, customer service going forward.
The Mall of America has been innovating for decades, perhaps the most innovative mall in the country.
Or offering new technologies that benefit the retailers within our building. We're now doing online live shopping that benefits the specific store here at the mall. So the sales are attributed here with direct shipping, either to the home or curbside pickup. And a variation of that, and I think this is going to be key for brands moving forward as well, are those brands that continue to align with purpose and with cause. So many of our online shopping shows right now, which are very popular, the products shown are being purchased by the consumer, but directly shipped and donated to a nonprofit charity at a time of need. So the sales go to the local store, right? They get the credit for it. It's a great value to our community, helping nonprofits, and it's an easy way at a time when a lot of people are afraid to go out and donate time, perhaps. They can still support worthy causes from the comfort of their couch.
I really like what you just shared. We were chatting with our retail team in China, and just to learn lessons before we went into shelter in place. And to your point, it was fascinating to hear how the malls in China were creating their own, through WeChat, their own system of promoting their tenants and selling directly from that store. And I think it's fantastic to hear the success you've seen as well.
The medical industry has been making moves into retail for a long time now. Now it's gaining more and more strength as we get closer. What are some of the creative uses you all are seeing from medical moving to retail and retail moving into medical?
An example would be that Walmart has already said 5 years ago they want to be the #1 provider of healthcare in the country, and they made that a statement, and they seem to be doing that, and we're all watching them expand that without even realizing how successful they are at it. You're probably all tracking it. My particular clients happen to be some of the bigger systems in the city of Chicago and surroundings. And what they're doing is trying to get the footprint out. They're trying to grab a big footprint for an outpatient center. So one of the projects we're doing, a former anchor had faded or failed or decided to close down. So now this hospital system is going in and becoming the new anchor for a mall, and they are jump-starting the renovation for the entire place because they can't be this beautiful building in an ugly mall. They have to help work to make the whole thing look good. It's not a mall, it's a strip center, but a large strip center. So everyone's taking a little bit of everybody's space. Retailers did all the great research for the great locations, and now the healthcare people are saying, "Oh, well, that's a great location. They already figured it out," And so it's helping both, I think. It's helping fill the empty stores too. I have a topic I wanted to bring up. I don't know where I mix it in. I live in a really great suburb of Chicago called Arlington Heights. And during COVID, there was a certain downtown area, 6, 7, 8 blocks of restaurants and really great little retail, which I think everyone would agree that even if we focus on malls and out parcels and very vibrant spaces away from downtowns, that many people like the idea. I mean, it's extremely popular to live near a downtown. So we ought to encourage at least trying to keep our downtowns alive while we're focusing on the other areas as well, keeping those retail things going. So what they did in Arlington Heights was something called Arlington Al Fresco. And they opened up the street, they closed down the streets, they moved barriers out so you could walk down the center of streets. And then the sidewalks just flowed all the way out, and you could get the entire square footage of a restaurant out on the sidewalk in front of the restaurant. And it became massively successful. There were more people out there eating outside during COVID in these restaurants than you ever had in those restaurants during normal times. And now they're going to resurrect it even after COVID's over. It's going to become a permanent feature, we believe. I think there are creative things you can do, though, to make these downtown retail areas vibrant. And then, of course, there's connectivities because some of these restaurants are in downtown. They're probably up in some of the great malls and in other areas. But I think people want to be in a downtown vibrant area. And if we can encourage to keep that going at the same time, we're doing all the other things, retail malls that are outpatient would be great.
Yeah, I would jump in too and say even beyond downtowns, there are those significant neighborhood areas that face the same opportunities and challenges, right? Those hubs of activity. Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest risks we face as an industry and as a society is our short-term memory, is the fact that so many of these places that did open up streets and did allow dining outside and stuff will quickly shut that down once a vaccine is accessible. We have a short-term memory, right? And zoning and everything goes back into effect. So it's being able to influence those decisions to say, let's think longer term. Let's think creatively. Same with health and safety. One of my fears is that many brands will, as this health issue becomes under control, is that many of us let our guard down and immediately say, that's it, we're good, we're past this. When in truth, there's going to be a significant portion of our consumer population that's going to be wary for 3 years down the road, easily, right? So we need to not lose sight of that and just let our guards down.
Well, Dan, Angie brought up some interesting stuff, and I'm wondering if you've thought about it or done anything at the mall. And you obviously have roller coasters, which nobody's brought up yet. But also fitness centers. Is a mall a place for a fitness center? Is it a place for a last mile distribution? Are there other creative uses you've kicked around?
Well, they're absolutely, they are places for those uses. Absolutely depends on the mall, depends on the location. We have had alternative uses since we opened in 1992. We have an 8-acre amusement park. I mean, 27 rides and attractions, full-size roller coasters, log chutes. It's massive, right? We have a giant aquarium. We have actually almost 24 attractions. We have 2 18-hole miniature golf courses inside Mall of America. It's amazing what alternate uses we've done in the past, but what we're doing now as well as we move forward. And I think there are opportunities. Over the past several years, we have added 2 attached luxury hotels So attached to our building, we have 850 hotel rooms, right? That's a feeder source for all of our tenants, for our restaurants, for our attractions. Part of this really tough year, challenging year, was the civil unrest, right, in May and June. And Minneapolis was an epicenter of that unrest for many reasons. And we lost many, many businesses, including schools and nonprofits. So we have used some of our space to open up a school that was burnt down, a high school, a charter school. So we're giving them free space to have classes here until they can rebuild. And quite honestly, the hope is that they'll continue a campus here on site, right? It's a great alternative use. It's a great feeder system for employees. It's a great service to the community.
Wow.
A food shelf lost its space. So we are offering space as a warehouse space for that local nonprofit. And then there are a lot of small shops that were burnt out this summer. So we opened a 5,000 square foot area called Community Commons. We have 17 vendors in there, all rent free, no cost to them, so that they can reestablish their businesses and their brands. It's a great community outreach, but it's also a great use of space that was underutilized, and it brings a new demographic and a new consumer base to Mall of America. So there's many advantages to these different use opportunities, but everything from baking to healthcare, we have a clinic on site, to physical education. There's so many different uses for facilities. I'm excited that we have many of them in place already, but we are looking at other opportunities as well.
I've got an interesting perch right now. In June, Transformco, which is the successor company for Sears, hired us nationally to represent them in the disposition of about 150 stores. And they're all over the country, everything from A sites to C sites. And I mean, we're seeing offers from motels and from medical fulfillment centers and storage and last mile and residential and you name it, we're seeing the offers or some demand for it. What I thought might be interesting for the people listening to this though is to talk about what some of the impositions are for these types of change of uses in retail, because it's daunting. And planners, and no disrespect to our architects on this call whatsoever, oftentimes, which is their task, is to wave the wand and say, this is what would be great here to solve this problem. And then it's up to the real estate people to try and figure out how to do it, put it into place. And I load up the impositions sort of in three buckets. And the first one really, and it's the most important one, really is basis. You know, what is the basis of that land, and how does it get adjusted to accommodate what the new highest and best use is for that site. The second, and it's in every deal, and that's control of the development rights. You know, the problem with retail is it's an embedded product with probably lots of time in place, and so there are leases in place, there are REAs in place, there are lots of stakeholders that have what I would call an internal say as to what goes there. And the last one is really the external stakeholders, and that's zoning, and that's city impositions, that's neighborhood associations on the traffic. What people forget about the development of retail is that the people who live near it and shop it are very loyal to it. They own it. In many cities, the regional mall was the absolute first thing designed in the master plan. And while it may not have been developed first because the residential was not there to support it, it was the sacred cow in the general plan. And when it finally got built, it was the crowning jewel of the overall planning of that city. So when one of these things fails and you got to unwind it, or some part of it, it's extremely, extremely complicated. And so what we're seeing right now is oftentimes a demand that does not align with one or two or three of those impositions. And it takes a combination of time and a lot of expertise to get it done. So I'll kind of leave it at that, but I think that that's sort of an important broader topic to kind of open up as it relates to changing the actual use.
I'm going to put you on the spot though, Chris, a little bit.
Sure.
Give us a couple specifics that you thought were had the most legs or the most interest.
Well, I look at, our industrial team, our company has formed this alliance between retail and industrial. We're calling it an industrial retail task force. And we've got a mall in the Midwest that we put a developer in. They're going to tear that thing down. They're going to tear that thing down, and they're going to build a big old last mile distribution hub, and you can imagine who it's for. That's obviously probably the biggest, baddest example I can give you. But the ones that I think are more relevant for more people are what I would call the urban micro-fulfillment opportunities. And so I've got a client who is working with a major retailer who owns their own buildings and their land in urban markets. Those footprints are too big for that operator. They're working with this developer to sell the real estate to the developer who would redevelop it. So check this out, for a combination of housing, retail for that retailer, last mile distribution for that retailer and others, and an appropriate amount of service retail on that side. Now that's obviously a very complicated deal, and one that'll take a lot of time to get done. But when you start to tie together those types of uses in an urban market, you're actually solving for a much higher land value that sits underneath that building right now. And I think that that people who are working in the urban markets are going to be very well served to figure out how to take think of a 150,000 square foot community shopping center in an urban market, and they got to pick a tenant, a Steinmart or a theater that's going to close or something like that, where you can free up 30, 50, 60,000 square feet of GLA, transfer the parking rights into something else that's more viable, restaurants or residential on the site, and then taking that micro 30, 50, 60,000 feet and converting it into some form of 3 to 5 mile last mile distribution in that market. Because you think about what Best Buy is doing in their own stores. The team talked about that a couple minutes ago. I mean, I think that's so smart, right? They got a fleet of stores. They're too big. They're going to cut off the back and they're going to distribute from their own stores. Perfect. Well, there are many retailers that don't either have that footprint in the urban markets, or their stores aren't big enough to do it. And so what they've got is where I live in the 405 freeway, somebody getting off at Wilshire Boulevard and trying to slog their way down to the Palisades or Santa Monica or some other place. And wouldn't it be great to find a 30,000 foot building closer to the beach? And I do believe that there are ways to solve for that kind of demand. And as people start to figure that out and communicate that to the retailers, there's a lot of upside in that, I think.
So Chris, let me ask you a question on that. And yeah, for sure, retail conversions have been a topic, both our companies are really good at talking about and have done. And the Midwest Mall to an e-com player, that's a great project. And that's a project that we've seen. So your company, your folks know even more about it than previously. But that smaller box, metaphorically closer to the beach, there are all issues around that, around zoning, truck count, so forth. There's projects in San Francisco right now that the city doesn't want, right? So you got to get through that hurdle, and that's a hurdle that's backward looking, not forward looking, that I could argue the municipal leadership in San Francisco needs to think about the model we live in today, not the model from yesterday, but that takes time with municipalities. Question for you though, as you think about that drive down the freeway to Malibu, like, is the urbanization trend that's maybe going backwards a little bit? And I think Los Angeles is still very crowded, right? But if Los Angeles's population count is actually going backwards, as is Chicago's, as is New York's, some people, does the math on urban infill change because of that? Because there are some vacancies that would fit that description in the peninsula of San Francisco, that there's one company probably wants all of them, but beyond that one and maybe a couple of other home improvement and big box retailers that are starting to go that way, is there going to be enough demand? I'm not questioning the trend. The trend is absolutely here, and the trend is part of why my company asked me to look at both. But I wonder if what that math looks like over the next couple of years.
So my example on the west side is probably not the best one, because I think that land values on the west side will continue to appreciate for all the obvious reasons. But if you take maybe the next level of density marketplace, pick a San Fernando Valley, something like that, the highest and best use is in our market is probably still always going to be multifamily for a while, because we are underhoused in Southern California for sure. But building a multifamily project over retail, has a whole different set of complications. What you see in many of these markets are what you would call 1960s and 1970s design construction, where you've got a ton of parking in the back of these shopping centers. You've got depths in many buildings that are 120, 140, 160 feet. You've got huge boxes that are obsolete. You've got ownerships that are family and are very much private client that don't want to sell, but do recognize they need to make some pivots and changes to it. I believe that there are ways to activate the rear of a building, take the rear 100 feet of a building, 120 feet of a building, leave the front 40, 50 feet of the building, activate that frontage for more appropriate retail uses that are going to pay a very high premium rent, and the rear, which has got access probably to excess parking, potentially some decent loading, is where I think there's opportunities for this micro fulfillment. Now, what's fascinating to me, John, is that I'm not seeing the demand yet. That's what's interesting to me, is I'm not getting calls from major retailers saying, "Hey, Chris, my legacy company has 1.5 million square feet that's now under a JLL banner." I think I'd be getting more calls from that right now. So I'm not quite sure where that disconnect is yet, or whether that fulfillment is being properly satisfied in a regional hub, and they don't mind taking those trucks off Wilshire Boulevard and just schlepping down 14 traffic signals. I'm not quite sure yet.
Chris, that's so interesting, and I'll leave this topic in a moment. Similar concerns I have, I guess, and again, in the Peninsula market where I was speaking to some folks over the last week, we all know that demand is there, but the tenants aren't showing up yet. I think 2020 has become so tactical, it's almost hard to think that strategically right now, but we all still know it's coming, but the tenant activity for that particular need is a little shallow right now. Yeah.
I would just also add, one thing that we noticed this year in terms of new activity or aggressive activity has been in the life science space.
Yes.
And so we're starting to see, and we're working with a handful of institutional clients that are looking to convert a lot of these big boxes, after going through, as Chris described, the, understanding of unraveling, what that retail power center looks like from an entire looking for campuses and good real estate, and paying a tremendous amount of towards that to create a new value proposition, I think, for a lot of our institutional retail clients that we see.
Life sciences and science and technology versus people and goods. So they might be planned at a stronger structure. Also, they were planned for incandescent or fluorescent light. So they have an abundance of power. And, when you think about what it takes to put like laboratory type space in an office building, it's sort of an ill fit because the floor to floor heights aren't right. You have to add all this extra mechanical equipment into the spaces where, the labs and clean rooms and things like that. And it's actually a really good fit. That's why I think we see, like Steve and I see medical going into these spaces, and you're right about life sciences. It would be a perfect fit. I put data centers into, of failing big boxes for similar reasons. It's got the floor-to-floor height. It's got the embedded power that that existed from its incandescent days, and it works, and it doesn't draw foot traffic. So that's the other challenge that I think, Chris, when you mentioned some of the barriers for some of the redevelopment and repositioning, one of the things that when I talk to municipalities, the challenge that they have is they're looking for things that generate sales tax and property tax, right? So, the challenge with the mall in concept, or even the strip centers, is what's going to replace all that, a area. A typical big box might be 12 to 20 acres of land with the associated parking. So, I'll suggest something to an economic developer, and they poo-poo it right away, even though it might be the most practical and best use, because, oh, well, senior living doesn't generate sales tax, or that won't generate enough sales tax. I'm like, any sales tax is better than nothing, but I understand where they're coming from, and I think there's a need for sort of a people, at least on the municipal side, to basically take a breath and see where the market goes. I've got one municipality that's telling a client of mine, oh, we need 10,000 square foot of retail in your mixed use development, and the market study says it only needs 4 at most.
Yeah. Todd, are you open to similar topics, or I have a thought I wanted to bring up with retailers.
I have a magic edit button, so go, let's do it all.
I am a bit of a car buff, and all the magazines are trying to get us prepared for this self-driving car phenomenon, which is supposedly coming. I have no interest in having one for myself, but there are dozens and dozens of YouTube videos and articles you all can read as retailers, and you may be all on top of it. But I believe, unfortunately, that self-driving autonomous vehicles are going to be a total game changer for the types of use of land and downtown environments. And a perfect example, it sounds like, what's the big difference whether you drive your car or not? Well, what it means is someone who can't normally drive can be driven somewhere, and a car can be stockpiled off-site, outside of a downtown area or outside of a mall area, and then the car can go and deliver the people around, and those big parking lots now become future footprints for a lot of development. I do not have experience professionally with working with self-driving cars in any way in any of our planning yet, but I brought it up to several of our clients to think down the road. I know that there is a parking garage in California in one of the building or office building. So I was just curious if you all in the retail industry have any kind of thoughts about how you're going to incorporate autonomous vehicles.
I can speak from our perspective. This is something that we've been talking about for several years now, including working with our city planners on how do we pivot once they become popular and really do become well used within our society. We have actually 2 very large parking ramps at the mall, 13,000 spaces between the 2 ramps. Underneath one of them, the lower level, is the busiest transit hub in the state of Minnesota. Sees about 3 million visits a year. Light rail comes in there, as well as several rapid bus lines. But we have plans already in place on adding additional places where self-driving cars could drop off passengers, could pick up passengers, easy access to the mall, safe, and then contingent plans on what we would do with that extra parking space, alternate use as well. So we are looking at that, and it's really important. And just really quickly on another subject, someone had mentioned earlier about longevity of stay, for instance, at malls, if that's a driving factor. We have our next expansion plan will be the addition of the largest indoor water park in the nation at Mall of America. And we were supposed to break ground this past fall. Obviously, those plans changed a little bit here the last few months. But ultimately, the goal is, even in the short-term thinking is attractions aren't that viable. Long-term thinking is people are looking for experiences and they're looking for connections. And if we can increase that length of stay on a property, whether it's here or elsewhere, you're building that loyalty and you're giving them other opportunities to support the other uses within your property. So we see that as key moving forward in our company.
Right, and I've seen it where I've looked at creating indoor ice rinks and did a mall overseas where they were putting in a ski slope. I mean, it's crazy. It's bringing people, treating the mall as a destination that you're selling experience as well as goods. And it all ties together in just a big event for a family or a group of people. And to your point, the connection touch still is paramount in what we're doing. Esport is another avenue where we're starting to see, inquiries is, could some of these boxes be turned into an esport venue? They're great, sort of skeletons to work with. And with esports increasing, it's a global phenomenon. It's growing and it's becoming an increased business. So I think when we're looking at opportunities for both the strip centers and the big box retailers and mall, bring people to a site over various points of the day and generate traffic is critical to success. So I mean, youth sports is over $1 billion things that kind of feed into that market and allow families to come together and spend a little dollar and spend some energy and time.
And Dan, you've done some creative stuff with that too. Do you related to esports, right?
Yeah, we do, and we've had some e-gaming launches in Mall of America. There's currently, we do have The Void, which is the Star Wars location for a company that allows students to come in and manufacture and then practice flying their own droids. So there's obstacle courses within it, right? So it builds on activity.
Wow.
So we've done a lot of that. We have several of those in place.
Dan, have you considered the robotics competitions? Because those are incredibly popular.
We have hosted them annually for many years. Yes,
Wow,
we
that's
love
great.
robotics. Yep.
Yes.
And so forth. And we're all living in a new world. It's, it's a combination of this and how we're using our devices, etc. So technology plays a huge role in everything we do I remember when I was traveling, this was last year, and I was fortunate to see, the mall in Dubai near the Burj Khalifa, and my gosh, the amount of visual stimulus was just insane. I was exhausted after 2 hours. I was like, I need to sit.
As we kind of move into the next era of what retail wants to be, we have to consider wellness as part of that going forward. And it just can't be that in-your-face experience for everybody. It doesn't work for necessarily everybody, right? That gets your extroverts there and they love the thing forever, right? You have points of sale and keeping people on a property is critical. We view malls like that as well. So, what are the things that are going to keep that introverted person coming to the mall and finding their space where they can get their own equilibrium and, shop in or something that has to be managed? But as we're getting into this era of technology, now your phone's chiming, hey, you're hitting the mall Wi-Fi and the phone's telling you, hey, there's a sale down the way, the path you're heading, right? It's getting to that point, if not already there, and what it's telling us. So, that's going to be critical. And then, when we're planning malls, we're actually looking at syntax modeling and so forth to try to, picture when things change. So how do you build in that flexibility too, that kind of, is going to work with this? And, so getting some of that AI data is going to be critical for us going forward when we plan and replan some of these areas to just understand how people are going to move in the future, so that we can maximize.
In healthcare, we're trying something called restoration rooms that are in hospitals for people that go through massive stress, professional staff people, and they just want to relax their sense. My wife just wanted to shop, and I sat in a room with about 4 other guys, and they gave us beer and wine, and we watched a game on TV, and she could shop all she wanted because I was comfortable in an easy chair. I'm wondering if there's some kind of a space that when you have, curious how you do that.
Yeah, and we've taken that into account because there are all different types of demographics and shopping styles and age groups, right? And your ability to endure all the action and the noise and the fracas that can be found in a large shopping center. But I think it's an opportunity for shopping centers of any size, right? In that you can provide a space or spaces that are calmer areas. For instance, I think we were the first indoor amusement park and the largest mall ever to be autism certified. So we provide quiet spaces for families who have family members who can't handle all the stimuli, right? And then we also have a lounge for guests that don't want to be in the midst of all the ruckus. So I do think that's an opportunity that everyone could take advantage of, whether it's in a very small scale or a grander scale, that you can offer those respite opportunities to sit down and enjoy a cup of coffee in the quiet.
We're seeing now that's unfortunately happening to a lot of these restaurants is awful, but they have a brand and that people connect with. So if there's ability for them to kind of help reposition themselves, maybe out of a, in the time being, out of a customer facing sense when, they have all this real estate and expenses, and maybe they, kind of keep their brands alive in that ghost kitchen doing delivery. I think that's the biggest challenge for a lot of restaurants right now is when they were created, they potentially didn't really have a good to-go business plan or weren't set up for a to-go business plan. They were really meant for a in-person dining experience. So that's the restaurants that I've seen that have been struggling are the ones that really were ones where they wanted you to be in person. And the pizzerias are doing great right now, right? The places that were always meant to be to go, they've not really suffered too much, but there's stuff, everyone's suffering. So I think that's what we'll see is, sort of a recalibration to the marketplace and understanding that maybe you can carry on that idea in a ghost kitchen to keep your brand alive until the market recorrects itself.
We've got a local pizza place with only a 10-foot frontage, but it's in the L-shaped elbow of a strip mall, and they're massively successful because they've got all the truck deliveries behind 80 by 80 square, and they can't get enough. They've got more revenue going in and out of that store than any place around them. They've got empty storefronts that are much bigger storefronts, but have smaller footprints. So it's really a great concept, and that could be a ghost kitchen.
Okay, last thing we got to touch on, I'll let you all go, medical. So again, I hear, and it's been going on for a while, right? Medical dentists and such have been in strip centers and things, but now we're hearing bigger medical centers, micro hospitals. What's really happening on the ground? Is there a possibility if I have some space in my strip center that there might be a new medical tenant that's coming in? And then what are the challenges? I know Kurt, you touched on a little bit with power and things like that, but let's just talk medical for a minute and then we can wrap up.
Go ahead, Kurt, if you want to.
I was going to say, it kind of depends on the market, right? So again, when we look at strip centers in their creation, the market study kind of says, okay, well, it's like a 15-minute drive time to get to it. So, there is opportunities depending on the market study of what's going in. So I think a lot of it is sort of a right sizing and a calibration to that local market and what's going to resonate. So I think we're seeing healthcare providers as they consolidate and looking to expand their footprint is how they can get some of these outpatient and urgent care. We just had, right, Steve, we just had a property looking at urgent care facilities in retail centers because, again, it's got the built-in parking. It's in the communities that need to be served. It might be close to grocery stores and other things that draw people to it. So it's automatic. You have that in-person sort of branding and visibility that's critical to their success. So I think that's what's important. They're flexible boxes, and it's great to be able to take that box and put it to something that's going to, one, bring people to a property, but two, provide a valuable service.
Well, and these outpatient centers are trying to handle more and more acuity, which is the level of care, and save the most stringent or the strongest or the most acute service for the hospitals themselves. They very much want the place to be a footprint that will be a referral center for the central hospital as much as they can. I was actually quite surprised when I was working on one project where my own dentist was going to be displaced by a new MOB that we were going to be building. And of course I was saying, oh, well, we're going to give you a new space. And I went to the meetings and found out that dentists don't refer, therefore they're not a desirable commodity to us. And, it's a terrible thing, but it's just the truth, I guess. So they wanted referral type doctors who would bring business to their hospital. But it's very definitely a direction of the major institutions. As all the mergers and acquisitions are going on, they are fighting for those spaces that they can compete with each other. You will see two different systems sitting across the street from each other in similar spaces. Now, if you all know about CON, Certificate of Need, roughly 2/3 of the states in the United States have a Certificate of Need. It's a political entity that decides whether or not you are allowed to build there so that you don't impact your competition. States like Indiana do not have a Certificate of Need. They say you build what you think you can live with. States like Illinois do. And so that factors in a little bit into, you can't just do what you want to do. You have to do what's allowed by your government.
And I just add to that, we have seen a tremendous movement towards these, call it, healthcare retail concepts. Urgent cares are definitely on the rise, whether they're small, independent, regional urgent cares or the likes of Carbon Health, One Medical, etc. And so I don't think that we're going to see a slowdown. They are looking at, community centers where they're well positioned near larger pharmacies like the CVS's and the Walgreens, etc. And as we all read, also CVS is also looking to create this, healthcare clinic within their sites. I think what's interesting that I've seen in my experience just recently is that again, going back and educating some of these more mature, retailers or drugstore concepts, that it's great to have these urgent cares, side by side, because they see them as a threat when really they can work, have great co-tenancy. And so I think that education process still is something that is, I wouldn't say it's a hurdle by any means, but it does slow down the process a bit. But we have seen an onslaught of LOIs and new deals coming through with those different brands. And the last one I'll share, which is, I guess, still in the health and wellness side of the business, is, we're still seeing cannabis, smaller in footprint, 1,000 square feet, 2,500 square feet, as more jurisdictions open up the ability to have cannabis health and wellness locations done and presented, quite nicely, almost in a retail storefront fashion. I think that that's another kind of wellness concept that will be rolling out again.
Pan out. We do have a clinic in partnership with mHealth Fairview on site, located right next to Walgreens on site. And for us, the key, and for the clinic, the key was density of internal population, right? So their customer base are the 12,000 employees that work in this building. So it's like a small town clinic.
Yeah.
So as opposed to relying on consumers, although they're welcome, they're relying on the internal population that comes here every day to work. And so from that density perspective, it works really well. Our hope is in the future, because we have a lot of property, we have 90 acres, is to work with a partner such as a Mayo to do a larger medical facility on one of our outlots. But for right now, that clinic has been very successful internally.